And this, I think, is why all of the idea of the US also, which is in a completely neurotic state about China, not an analytical state, a completely psychologically neurotic state, is because they cannot use numbers in Washington, and they don't look at data, and they don't understand that China's share of the world economy has basically peaked. It will peak at around 20% of world output, and then it will decline. Not because China will fail, but because China's size in population will diminish from around 18% of the world population today to around 7% of the world population by 2100. They're very concerned about it. They're now trying to have a two-child policy, a three-child policy, a more-child policy, but it won't work. It won't work because fertility rates are low and are going to stay low in all high urban centers of the world. Children are expensive, if you don't notice it. They take 25 years to raise at a minimum, whereas your next robot will get a PhD in 3 hours. And so the robot-child trade-off is very powerful, and it's going to be even more powerful in the future. And this means that these demographics are actually quite real. So Africa's share of the world economy, which is negligible today, will become 20, 25, even 30% of the world economy by the end of the 21st century. This is also, I think, helpful to think about national strategy, because if you are thinking really about national strategy, think about the future markets, not the past markets. The US, Europe, little boring, protectionist, little bit slow, but the big growth in the world is going to come in Africa. That's for sure, quantitatively. Big growth is going to come throughout Asia. It's not going to come in the old, mature, slow-growing, demographically declining parts of the world. And so that means that economic strategy, markets, export development, and so forth should really be geared towards the future. So what could go wrong? I want to ask. Unfortunately, everything. The underlying reasons for optimism, in my view, are very strong, because we're in a technological, miraculous age. It's nothing short of that. The advances that can come from AI are truly breathtaking. They're not hype. We have no reason to have earned so much power from these technologies. No one could have imagined even 10 years ago that the Nobel Prize in chemistry would be won by somebody who probably didn't have one day of class in chemistry, but is very good at programming computers. And that is Demis Hassabis of DeepMind, who designed an AI system for protein folding, not as a biochemist who spent his life on that, but as a neural network programmer who realized that the computer software could be trained to explain protein folding. And that kind of advance is pervasive across every scientific field right now, across every service sector, across healthcare delivery, across educational delivery, across basic research in material science, in agronomical science, in drug development. We have no right to have expected so much capacity from these neural network systems, And in fact, 30 years ago, they were more or less dismissed as an interesting sideshow, but MIT essentially declared them dead, that this was not the way that expert systems on computers could work. But then came computing power and the data of the internet, which provided a way to train these systems. And suddenly we have an unaccountable, unexpected explosion of capacity across almost every scientific discipline and natural languages. And combining the natural languages with the robotics, we really are going to have, I think Musk is right, we're going to have many more humanoid robots than we have human beings on the planet, probably within the next 25 years. And so this is potentially completely fundamental in breakthrough. I don't think Gunnar Myrdal would have anticipated, and frankly, when Sonia and I were waiting in line at a bank here for about 4 hours with forms filled out, not in triplicate, but in I don't know how many iplicates, to make a tiny transaction about 40 years ago, that you would imagine that every vendor in this country now has a QR code, is online, and so on. And that's just the tip of what can be accomplished in our technological age. So convergence completely possible. For the regions far behind, still completely possible. No one is going to be left out of this, in my view. So what are the downsides, or what are the dangers? Well, it is, unfortunately, the human intelligence, or lack of it, not the artificial intelligence, which is the biggest challenge. And I just want to mention a few of the most basic points of our world today. First, the United States and Europe are not in decline, but they are in relative decline. So the US is not in outright collapse, although it's got many crises, by the way, but it's still a very dynamic, interesting country by all standards, and it is the main creator of the digital age, in fact, which is a set of investments that goes back about 90 years now. And I would say the US has done a good job in that. But the relative decline is unavoidable. And that raises, as I said, a neurotic reaction. And we're experiencing that neurotic reaction in two ways. Actually, the first way, starting in 1992 with the demise of the Soviet Union, the United States truly believed it was the permanent, unrivaled power of the world. It told itself that every day. I heard that every day as a Harvard faculty member. Look into a mirror and say you are the unrivaled power of the world. This was essentially a command of the faculty. And it was imparted to our students and throughout the society. Of course, it was a complete illusion and a basic misunderstanding about convergence and temporary advantage, and even what the end of the Cold War had really meant, because it was not a defeat of the Soviet Union so much as a reform of the system of Russia. But the United States likes victories. It doesn't like cooperation. It doesn't like anything more complex than win and lose. And so it was taken as the unipolar moment. Around 15 years ago, China threw a spanner into this. And the spanner was that suddenly that all that 10% per year compound growth that China had achieved since 1980 added up to an economy that was, in purchasing power terms, reaching the size of the US, albeit at 1/4 of the per capita income level. And then China announced in 2014 two initiatives. One, the Belt and Road Initiative, to say we will reach out and make connections with other countries of the world. And the second, a Made in China 2025 initiative to say we've identified 10 cutting-edge lead technologies and we intend to be a world leader in these technologies. This put the US into a complete frenzy. The audacity of China to launch these things was unforgivable and remains unforgiven to this day. And the US has been going out of its way, including enlisting India in the effort to contain China. This is not a smart idea. It's not a good idea. It's not a possible idea. It's not an effective idea. It can only lead to either complete failure or to complete trouble. And we're not sure which of the two or both this will be. The failure is on full display every day. The US has not choked China off from technological advance in the slightest, in my view. Whether it's AI or semiconductors or advanced chips or quantum computing or space technology, there's no discernible gap. There is no choke point for the US to maintain dominance. DeepSeek was not the only example of this, but only the latest example. Oh yeah? You think you're 10 years ahead? Oh yeah? And if you go to Shenzhen, as my wife and I do around 3 times a year, you see the cutting edge there, no question. And nothing is cutting off these companies, whether the US puts on export bans or not. So my advice is don't play the game even. The Quad and all of that, this is US think. This is 20th century, old-fashioned confrontation think. This is not serious, make the world a better place, a safer place, and a more prosperous place way to act. China also came to become the low-cost producer of the whole range of green technologies, from renewable energy, long-distance power generation, battery supply chains, and electric vehicles. And again, one other point I would say about this, the US and Europe debated for the last 15 years, well, electric vehicles, are they real or are they not real? China figured out 15 years ago, electric vehicles are the future. They unleashed an incredible competition of literally hundreds of new companies, and now they're the low-cost producers. And Tesla is just another one of the mix, and not especially competitive in the mix of Chinese electric vehicles. The same, by the way, is about to happen with humanoid robots, where Elon Musk is going to bring out an Optimus robot as part of Tesla next year. China's already got 20 that are comparable, fully on display. So this is why there is no chokehold and no stopping this. Now, India should do the same. These are key technologies. Made in India 2035 makes perfect sense. You need an industrial strategy, because an industrial strategy combines champions, it combines entrepreneurs, like the benefactor of the university. And India has many outstanding entrepreneurs, but they also need government finance for R&D. They need university support. They need early demonstration and regulatory support. They need a financial market that works well and puts in venture capital into these opportunities as well. So this, I think, is the next wave. It also, You have to stop me at any moment, by the way, because I have about 8 hours of things I'd like to say. It will kill you with your patience, but I'll try to limit my time just for another 10 minutes. What other threats do we have that can get things completely off track from what otherwise can be truly a golden era, I would say, an era of global convergence and rising living standards? Obviously, what I haven't mentioned at all yet, but is fundamental, is the ecological crisis. The ecological crisis is real. It's multifaceted. It comes from the obvious fact of 200 years of industrial development with very little attention to the ecological consequences. And it's inconvenient, because it would be nice if coal, oil, and gas would continue to be the fundamental primary energy sources for the world, because we know them, we know where they are produced, we have generations of engineers who understand them, and so forth. But it's not to be, because global warming has accelerated. This country is one of the most vulnerable in the whole world, in some ways the most vulnerable. There are no other places in the planet with such large populations experiencing 50 degrees C events as India. Other countries will experience other kinds of disasters with rising sea levels and so forth, but India will experience heat waves that are unimaginable, but for very concentrated populations at enormous scale, an enormous challenge to water security. And so this is not a small matter. And this is why the transformation of the economy to a zero carbon economy is really paramount. India has a goal to do this by 2070. It should be done by 2050, I'm sorry to tell you. It could be done by 2050. It would be a lot of investment. A lot of nuclear power, by the way, will have to be part of this, as well as renewable energy, but India has the potential for both and should develop both. But the stakes are extremely high. Yesterday, I hosted a talk by my climate guru colleague, James Hansen, who was America's lead climate scientist for the last 30 years. He's just come out yesterday with a paper about the acceleration of global warming, which is now proceeding at faster than 0.3 degrees Celsius per decade. And he explains the recent rise of world temperatures, which have risen by 0.3 degrees C in the last 5 years, as you've noticed. We breached the 1.5 degree, and he explains it by the fact that there was a lot of clearing up of air pollution, of sulfur aerosols in shipping, and that was causing dimming of the sunshine up until 5 years ago. That has been cleared, and the underlying warming is now becoming evident. And he had told me already 10 years ago that this was going to happen, and now it's happened, and he's documented it extremely carefully. So when India takes on the technological revolution and takes on the Made in India 2035 program, which is needed, it should take on the commitment to the green transformation as well as the digital transformation. It's not a gimmick. It's not simply a cost. It is the inevitable future for the whole planet. Trump, of course, doesn't understand it at all. And a little bit like a child, he loves money now. And he loves what he calls liquid gold, which is oil and gas under the ground. It's a little primitive. I don't think he ever studied global warming one day in his life. It's quite convenient if you're funded by the oil industry to say that it's a hoax. It's not a hoax. America will not stop its transformation to zero carbon energy. By the way, Trump won't even slow it down. In fact, I doubt that he'll get more drilling going because nobody sees a future in any of that. And when half your city of Los Angeles burns down a couple of weeks ago, you kind of get the message that something serious is underway. So for India, don't ride a coattail of Trump saying, well, we're out of the Paris Agreement. Take it as an opportunity to lead the way together with China on the technologies of the future, because this is really where the future markets are, as well as where the future needs of the world are. The final point I want to say is that our biggest single risk in the world is geopolitical and military. And that is, unfortunately, in my view, I'm only speaking for myself, but it is the United States being the most dangerous country in the world in the next period of time. And that is because the US believes in its hegemony still, or its unilateralism. Trump is not exactly a hegemonist the way that the Biden group was, because Biden was an old-fashioned American dominance president, living somewhere around the 1990s in his mind, thinking that we are now the only superpower in the world. Trump is more clever than that. But Trump's view is we don't have to cooperate with anybody. We don't really have any friends. We don't really have even any interests other than his own. And we don't need to be in treaties. We don't need to be in the UN. We don't need to even abide by the golden rule, if I could put it that way, because Trump's basic message is don't bother us in our neighborhood and we will bother you in yours. This is the main message of American foreign policy. Don't come anywhere close to the United States, and that includes Greenland, Canada, Panama, wherever we draw the line, but we reserve the right to be in the South China Sea, in the East China Sea, in Taiwan, in any context that we want, that if you were doing it to us, we would view that as a cause of war. This is the American mindset, unfortunately. The next stage of moral development, as Lawrence Kohlberg called it, which usually comes at around 4 years old, is you should do the other what you would like them to do to you. And we're not quite there geopolitically yet. So this is, to my mind, our biggest risk. We are, as the Bulletin of Atomic Scientists unveiled on January 28th, in its doomsday clock, 89 seconds to Armageddon. What they mean by that, as they explain by the clock, is that our threats of nuclear war, environmental catastrophe, runaway autonomous weapons, and other extraordinarily dangerous technologies have brought us closer to the risks of survival itself than at any time in modern history. This doomsday clock was started in 1947 after the atomic bomb was first invented and then used. And at that point, the clock was put at 7 minutes to midnight. When the Soviet Union ended in 1991, the bulletin put the hand of the clock at 17 minutes from midnight, saying we are safer now than we've been at any time during the Cold War period. We've had since then Clinton, Bush, Obama, Trump, and Biden, 5 presidencies, every one of which inherited a clock that was farther from midnight than they left it to the next administration. Biden left the clock at 89 seconds to midnight. And I think it's a slightly over-optimistic assessment. We are firing missiles into Russia as we speak. Biden and now apparently Trump have given the green light to Ukrainians to use ATACMS missiles, which are medium-range, non-nuclear missiles, to fire deep into Russia. And the point that President Putin has been making for years is that those missile systems require US programmers actively setting the targets, tracking the missiles, managing the launches. So this is an attack by the United States on Russia, nothing less. Is that a good idea when Russia has 1,600 nuclear weapons and the United States has 1,600 nuclear weapons actively deployed on both sides? I don't think so. So I want to end by also appealing to India to play its role in global peace. I have one particular pet project that I want to help promote. India needs to be the 6th permanent member of the UN Security Council. The largest country in the world, a superpower by every standard, a country with a tradition of peace, with a philosophy of peace that has given the world a philosophy of peace. We need you in the Security Council. My advice, be nice to China, and they'll help you get in the Security Council. And I want to be there to help as well. Thank you very much.